At 73 years old, I thought I had earned the right to feel safe in my own home. I was wrong. The birthday cake sat in front of me, 73 candles flickering like tiny prayers I should have made years ago. My dining room was full of neighbors, old friends from the construction company, people who had known me since before Hailey was born. Mrs. Patterson from next door had brought her famous potato salad. Jim Morrison, who worked with me for 30 years building houses across this town, was telling stories about the time we finished the Henderson place in the middle of a snowstorm. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. Everyone was laughing, toasting my health, wishing me many more years. It should have been perfect. It should have been one of those moments when you look around and think about how blessed you are to have people who care about you. Instead, I was watching my son-in-law lean against my kitchen counter with that expression he always wore around me. That look that said he was tolerating something unpleasant but necessary. Zachary had been married to my daughter for 3 years, and in all that time, I had never once seen him look genuinely happy to be in my presence. At 30 years old, he carried himself like he was doing the world a favor just by existing. He worked at some tech company downtown, making good money according to Hailey, but he dressed like he was trying to prove something every day. Designer shirts, expensive watches, shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. Everything about him screamed that he thought he was better than everyone else in the room, especially me. I had been supporting Hailey and Zachary financially since they got married, not just help here and there, but real support. Their apartment rent, car payments, student loans, credit card bills when things got tight. I told myself it was temporary, that young couples needed help getting started. I told myself it was what good fathers do for their children. The truth was, I was trying to buy my way into Zachary's acceptance. Every check I wrote was a desperate attempt to prove that I was valuable, that I deserved to be part of their lives. Every month when Hailey called asking for help with this bill or that emergency, I said yes immediately, hoping that this time Zachary might thank me, might treat me with basic respect. It never worked. If anything, the more I gave, the less he seemed to think of me, like I was some kind of charity case who was lucky they even acknowledged my existence. The worst part was watching what it was doing to Hailey. My daughter, who used to call me every day just to talk, now only called when she needed money. Our conversations had become transactions. She would start with a few minutes of small talk, asking about my health or the weather, then gradually work her way around to whatever financial crisis they were facing this month. I missed the Hailey who used to help me in the garage when she was little, handing me tools and asking 1,000 questions about how things worked. I missed the teenage Hailey who brought her friends over for barbecues and bragged about how her dad could fix anything. I missed the young adult Hailey who called me for advice about everything from job interviews to recipes. Now she was 27 years old and felt like a stranger. She still looked like my daughter, still had the same green eyes and stubborn chin, but something fundamental had changed. She had become careful around me, weighing her words, managing our relationship like it was a business partnership instead of a family bond. And Zachary was always there, hovering in the background, making it clear that I was an inconvenience in their lives. Tonight, as I looked around my dining room full of people celebrating my birthday, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. These were good people, neighbors and friends who genuinely cared about me, but the two people who should have mattered most felt like strangers playing roles they resented. Hailey was helping serve cake in the kitchen, making polite conversation with Mrs. Patterson about her job at the insurance office. She looked beautiful, but distant, like she was performing being my daughter rather than actually being her. And Zachary stood apart from everyone, checking his phone every few minutes, making it obvious that he had better places to be. When it came time to cut the cake, everyone gathered around the dining room table. Mrs. Patterson started leading the group in singing Happy Birthday, and I found myself looking at each face around me. Jim Morrison, grinning and slightly off-key. The Hendersons from down the street, who had been our neighbors for 15 years. Young couple from the corner house with their 2 kids, who always waved when I worked in my garden. Real people, good people, people who treated me like I mattered. Then I looked at Hailey and Zachary standing together near the kitchen doorway, and my heart sank a little. Hailey was singing along, but mechanically, like she was going through the motions. Zachary was not even pretending to sing. He was looking at his watch. As the song ended and everyone started clapping, I picked up the knife to cut the cake. That was when I heard it. Zachary leaning close to Hailey, his voice just loud enough for me to catch the words. "Hope it's his last." The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. For a moment I could not breathe. The knife froze in my hand halfway to the cake, and I had to force myself to keep moving, to keep smiling, to pretend I had not heard what I had just heard. My son-in-law, standing in my house, eating my food, living off my financial support, had just wished for my death, on my birthday, in front of all these people who cared about me. I looked up at him, and for just a second our eyes met. He did not look ashamed or embarrassed. He looked annoyed, like I had caught him at something minor and inconvenient. Then he looked away, back to his phone, like nothing had happened. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It started in my chest and spread through my whole body like fire. I wanted to grab him by his expensive shirt and throw him out of my house. I wanted to shout at him in front of everyone, to expose him for the ungrateful, cruel person he really was. But I did not do any of those things. Instead, I smiled. I cut the cake. I handed out pieces to my guests and accepted their birthday wishes and made small talk about the weather and the new construction project starting across town. And when Zachary came over to get his piece of cake, looking at me with that same expression of barely tolerated annoyance, I handed it to him and said, "My wish was already made too." He took the plate without really looking at me, probably did not even register what I had said, but I knew exactly what my birthday wish had been. I wished for the strength to finally stop letting people treat me like I did not matter. The party continued for another hour. People stayed and talked and laughed, and I played the part of the happy birthday man surrounded by his loving family. But inside, everything had changed. Something had broken tonight that could never be fixed. When the last guest finally left, Hailey and Zachary helped me clean up. Well, Hailey helped. Zachary mostly sat at the table playing with his phone while she loaded dishes into the dishwasher, and I put away leftover food. "Thanks for including everyone tonight, Dad," Hailey said as she wiped down the counter. "I know Mrs. Patterson really enjoyed herself." "It was a nice party," I agreed, not trusting myself to say more. Zachary looked up from his phone long enough to add, "Yeah, good turnout for an old guy." Even that. Even the smallest acknowledgement had to come with an insult. I nodded and said nothing, but I was memorizing everything, every casual cruelty, every dismissive comment, every sign that they saw me as a burden instead of a person. They left around 10 o'clock, Hailey giving me a quick hug and Zachary offering a limp handshake. As I watched their car pull out of my driveway, I thought about all the birthdays when Hailey was small, when she would spend the whole day planning some special surprise for me. Hand-drawn cards, projects made at school, cookies we would bake together in my kitchen. When had we lost that? When had my daughter become someone who showed up out of obligation and left as quickly as politeness allowed? I knew the answer. It was when Zachary came into her life and slowly, methodically convinced her that her father was an embarrassment she needed to manage rather than a person she could love. I sat alone in my clean kitchen, still hearing those words echoing in my head. Hope it's his last. My son-in-law had looked at my birthday cake and wished for my death, and tomorrow he would come back to this house, expecting me to welcome him, to continue supporting him, to keep pretending that we were family. But something had shifted tonight, something permanent and irreversible. I had spent 3 years trying to earn Zachary's respect and my daughter's genuine affection. I had given them money, support, endless patience, and understanding. I had swallowed my pride and ignored countless small insults and dismissals, and in return they had wished for my death. Tomorrow was going to be very different. Tomorrow Zachary was going to learn that this old man still had some fight left in him. Tomorrow he was going to discover that respect cannot be bought, but it can definitely be demanded. I turned off the kitchen light and headed upstairs to bed, but I knew I would not sleep tonight. I had too much planning to do. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there from the very beginning, but I was so desperate to believe that my daughter had found happiness that I ignored every red flag Zachary threw up. The first time Hailey brought him home for dinner, he was 27 and she was 24. Fresh out of college, working her first real job, and completely smitten with this smooth-talking guy who worked in tech and drove a car that cost more than I made in 6 months. I remember standing at my front window, watching him park that silver BMW in my driveway, thinking about how different he was from the boys Hailey had dated in high school and college. Those had been good kids, polite, respectful, The kind who called me sir and helped clear the table after dinner without being asked. Zachary walked into my house like he was evaluating it for purchase. His eyes swept over my furniture, my decorations, my 40-year-old television, and I could see him cataloguing everything, filing it away under not impressive. When I offered to shake his hand, his grip was limp, dismissive, like touching me was something he was enduring rather than choosing to do. During dinner that first night, he spent most of the time talking about his job, his apartment, his plans for advancement at the company. Everything was about him. When I tried to ask about his family, his background, he gave short answers and steered the conversation back to his achievements. Dad Zachary graduated summa cum laude from State, Hailey said proudly, looking at him like he had invented electricity. And he's already being considered for a promotion after just 8 months at the company. That's impressive, I said, genuinely trying to connect. What kind of work do you do exactly? Software development, he said, not bothering to elaborate. Then he looked around my kitchen and added, this is a nice old house. Must be what, 1960s? 1958, I corrected. I bought it right after I started my construction business, fixed it up myself over the years. He nodded like I had confirmed something he already suspected. Yeah, you can tell it's been lived in. The way he said it, lived in, sounded like a polite way of saying run down. I felt Hailey tense beside me, and I saw her give him a look I did not understand at the time. Later I would realize it was a warning look, the kind that said be nice to my father. But even then, barely an hour into our first meeting, Zachary had already decided I was not worth his effort, and for some reason, instead of being offended, I found myself trying harder to impress him. Hailey tells me you like to work on cars, I said, grasping for common ground. I've got a '67 Mustang out in the garage I've been restoring. Maybe you'd like to take a look after dinner. Thanks, but I'm not really into the old muscle car thing, he said dismissively. I prefer modern engineering, German engineering specifically. Of course he did. Of course my classic American car that I had spent 3 years lovingly restoring was not good enough for his sophisticated tastes. But I kept trying. I asked about his hobbies, his interests, his plans with Hailey. Everything I said seemed to bounce off him like he was wearing some kind of armor against forming any real connection with me. And the more he pulled away, the harder I tried. That pattern continued for months. Every time they came over for dinner, every holiday gathering, every family event, I would make an effort to reach out to him, and he would respond with the minimal politeness required to avoid outright rudeness. When they announced their engagement after dating for 2 years, I was genuinely happy for Hailey. She was glowing, excited, talking about dress shopping and venue hunting and all the things young women dream about for their weddings. But even during the engagement party at my house, Zachary spent most of the evening in the corner with his phone, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. He's just not comfortable with big groups, Hailey explained when I mentioned it to her later. He's more of an introvert. Once you get to know him better, he opens up. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that my future son-in-law was just shy, that he needed time to warm up to me, that eventually we would find that common ground and build a real relationship. But as the months passed, instead of opening up, he seemed to close off even more. And worse, I started noticing changes in Hailey. She had always been affectionate with me, the kind of daughter who hugged me hello and goodbye, who called just to chat, who asked my opinion about things even when she had already made up her mind. But gradually, that easy affection became more formal, more careful. She stopped calling as often. When she did call, our conversations felt scripted, like she was checking items off a list. Ask about Dad's health, check. Ask about work, check. Make small talk for exactly 15 minutes, then find a polite way to end the call, check. When I would call her, she often sounded distracted, like she was doing something else while talking to me. Sometimes I could hear Zachary in the background, and her responses would become even more clipped and careful. The first time they asked for money, it was 6 months after the wedding. Hailey called, sounding stressed and apologetic. Dad, I hate to ask, but we're having some trouble with our rent this month. Zachary's company did some restructuring and his bonus got delayed, and we're just short about $800. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you help us out? We'll pay you back as soon as his bonus comes through. Of course I said yes, $800 was not going to break me, and young couples face financial challenges. It was normal, I told myself. It was what fathers do for their children. The bonus never came through, or if it did, they never mentioned paying me back. But a month later, there was another call. Car trouble this time. The transmission had gone out on Hailey's Honda, and they needed $1,200 for repairs. Again, I said yes. Again, they promised to pay me back when things got better. Again, the subject never came up again. By the end of their first year of marriage, I had given them almost $4,000. Never a word of gratitude from Zachary. Never even an acknowledgement that the money was coming from me. Hailey would call, explain the crisis, and I would transfer money to their account. It was like I had become their personal bank, providing emergency funds without any of the normal requirements banks have, like interest or actual repayment. But the worst part was not the money. The worst part was watching Zachary's treatment of me get progressively worse as he realized I would keep giving them whatever they needed. He stopped making even token efforts at conversation during family gatherings. He would show up at my house for Sunday dinners and spend the entire meal looking at his phone. When I tried to engage him in discussion, he would give one-word answers without looking up. "How's work going, Zachary?" "Fine." "Busy season for your company?" "Yeah. Hailey mentioned you might be traveling for a project next month." "Maybe." It was like talking to a teenager, except teenagers usually grow out of that phase. Zachary seemed to be growing deeper into it, and Hailey just accepted it. When I would try to talk to her about his behavior, she would make excuses. "He's under a lot of pressure at work, Dad. He's just tired. This project has been really demanding. You know how men are. They're not as social as women." "No," I wanted to say, "I know how respectful men are. I know how grown adults behave when they are guests in someone's home. I know how decent people treat their family members." But I did not say those things because I was afraid of driving Hailey away completely. I was afraid that if I forced her to choose between her husband and her father, she would choose him. So I swallowed my pride and continued to accept the unacceptable. The breaking point should have been last Christmas. Zachary and Hailey came over for Christmas dinner, along with my sister Ruth and her family from out of state. I had spent all morning cooking, preparing all of Hailey's favorite dishes, trying to make the day special for everyone. During dinner, my nephew David, who was home from college, was telling stories about his engineering program. David was 20 years old, enthusiastic about his studies, excited about his future. He was asking Zachary about his work, trying to learn about the tech industry, looking for advice and mentorship. Zachary responded with barely concealed contempt. Every question David asked was met with a dismissive response or an eye roll. When David mentioned that he was considering a minor in computer science, Zachary actually laughed. "Computer science minor," he said with a smirk. "That's like having a minor in basket weaving. Either you're serious about tech or you're not. Half measures just prove you don't understand what you're getting into." The kid's face fell. Ruth shot me a look across the table, and I could see her anger building. David, to his credit, tried to recover. "I just thought it might complement my mechanical engineering degree," he said quietly. "Everything complements everything if you think about it hard enough," Zachary said, taking another bite of my ham. "But employers can tell the difference between people who are committed and people who are just checking boxes." That was enough. I cleared my throat and said, "David, I think combining engineering with computer skills sounds really smart. The construction industry is using more technology every year. Guys who understand both sides are going to be in high demand." Zachary looked at me like I had just claimed the earth was flat. "With all due respect, building houses is not exactly cutting-edge technology." The silence that followed was deafening. Ruth's husband was staring at his plate. David looked like he wanted to disappear. Hailey was looking back and forth between Zachary and me, with panic in her eyes. "You're right," I said evenly. "Building houses is not cutting edge. It's just necessary. People need places to live, and somebody has to know how to build them properly. It's honest work that provides value to families." "Sure," Zachary said with a shrug. "I'm just saying there are different levels of complexity in different industries." The implication was clear. His work was complex and important. Mine was simple and insignificant. In my own house, at my own table, eating food I had prepared, he was telling my family that my life's work was beneath consideration. Hailey jumped in quickly, trying to smooth things over. "Dad, this ham is incredible. What did you put in the glaze?" And just like that, we moved on. No one called Zachary out for his rudeness. No one pointed out that he was being deliberately insulting to his host. We all just pretended it had not happened and finished our Christmas dinner with forced cheerfulness. But I remembered. I filed it away with all the other small cruelties, all the casual dismissals, All the moments when he made it clear that he saw me as some kind of inferior life form that existed solely to provide financial support for his lifestyle. The money requests had gotten bigger and more frequent over the past year. What started as emergency help with rent and car repairs had expanded to credit card payments, student loan assistance, and vague requests for help with unexpected expenses that were never clearly explained. I had given them over $15,000 in the 3 years they had been married. $15,000, and Zachary had never once thanked me directly, never once acknowledged my generosity or treated me with basic human respect. Instead, he had gotten progressively more comfortable treating me like hired help, someone who existed to solve his problems and then disappear until the next crisis arose. And now, last night, he had finally said what he really thought. He had wished for my death, right there in my dining room, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. As I sat in my kitchen this morning, drinking coffee and thinking about the past 3 years, I realized that I had enabled every bit of this. I had taught Zachary that disrespecting me had no consequences. I had shown him that no matter how badly he treated me, the money would keep coming. I had trained my own daughter to see our relationship as transactional rather than emotional. I had been so desperate to be needed, so afraid of losing Hailey completely, that I had allowed myself to become their personal ATM. And like any ATM, I was only valuable for what I could provide, not for who I was as a person. But that was ending today. Today, Zachary was going to learn that every action has consequences. Today, my daughter was going to discover that her father still had some self-respect left. Today, the Stuart who built a successful business, who raised a daughter on his own after her mother died, who survived and thrived for 73 years, was going to remind everyone exactly who they had been taking for granted. The doorbell rang just after 9 o'clock. I knew who it was before I answered. Zachary and Hailey stood on my front porch, and I could see immediately that something was wrong. Hailey looked upset, her eyes red like she had been crying. Zachary looked angry, his jaw set in that stubborn line I had come to know so well. "Dad," Hailey said before I could say anything, "we need to talk." I stepped aside to let them in, but everything about their body language told me this was not going to be a pleasant conversation. Hailey walked past me into the living room, her movements quick and nervous. Zachary followed, and I noticed he was carrying a folder in his hand. "What's this about?" I asked, though part of me already suspected I was not going to like the answer. Hailey sat down on my couch, the same couch where she used to curl up with me to watch movies when she was little. Now she perched on the edge like she was ready to run. Zachary remained standing, holding that folder like it contained something important. "Dad, we're worried about you," Hailey started, her voice shaking slightly. "Last night, some of the things you said, the way you were acting, we think you might need help." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What kind of help?" Zachary stepped forward, his expression serious in a way I had never seen before. For once, he was not looking at his phone or checking his watch. He was focused entirely on me, and something about that focus made my skin crawl. "Stuart, we've been talking to some people, getting advice about elderly care options," he said, opening the folder. "There are some really nice facilities in the area that specialize in helping seniors who are starting to experience cognitive decline." Cognitive decline. The words hit me like a slap across the face. "Excuse me? Dad, please don't get upset," Hailey said quickly. "We're not saying anything is definitely wrong, but last night, some of the things you said to Zachary, the way you were looking at people, it just seemed like you might be getting confused about things." I stared at my daughter, trying to process what I was hearing. Confused about what things? Zachary pulled out a brochure from his folder. "Sunset Manor has an excellent reputation. They have different levels of care depending on what someone needs. Independent living apartments for people who just need a little help, assisted living for those who need more support, and memory care for residents with dementia or Alzheimer's." Memory care. Dementia. They were talking about putting me in a nursing home because I had finally stood up to my son-in-law's disrespect. "I am not confused," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "I am not experiencing cognitive decline, and I certainly do not have dementia." "Dad, I know this is hard to hear," Hailey said, tears starting to form in her eyes, "but sometimes people who are experiencing these issues don't realize it themselves. That's part of the condition." The condition. My own daughter was sitting in my living room, talking about me like I was already gone, like the man who raised her had been replaced by some confused old person who needed to be managed and contained. "What exactly did I say last night that has you so concerned?" I asked. Hailey and Zachary exchanged a look. It was Zachary who answered. "You made some inappropriate comments during the cake cutting. You seemed to be responding to things that weren't really happening, and you were staring at people in a way that made them uncomfortable." I almost laughed. Almost. "Inappropriate comments? You said something about wishes being made," Hailey said quietly. "It didn't really make sense in the context of what was happening. And Mrs. Patterson mentioned that you seemed distracted during conversations, like you were hearing things she wasn't saying." Mrs. Patterson, my 78-year-old neighbor who had been nothing but kind to me for 15 years. They had enlisted her in their campaign to declare me mentally incompetent. "I see," I said, "and based on this overwhelming evidence of my mental decline, you've decided I need to be institutionalized." "Dad, please don't use words like that," Hailey said, reaching out toward me. "Sunset Manor is not an institution. It's a community. There are activities, social programs, medical care on site. You could make friends, have people to talk to. I have people to talk to. I have friends. I have a home that I built with my own hands and a life that I have spent 73 years creating." Zachary stepped closer, and his voice took on a tone I had never heard from him before. Almost gentle, almost caring. It was more terrifying than his usual contempt. "Stuart, I know this is difficult, but we have to think about safety. What if something happens to you here alone? What if you fall or have a medical emergency or get confused and leave the stove on? We love you too much to let you put yourself at risk. We love you too much." Coming from the man who had wished for my death less than 12 hours ago. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the little girl who used to trust me completely, who believed I could fix anything and protect her from everything. But all I saw was a young woman who had been convinced that her father was broken and needed to be put away. "Hailey," I said quietly, "do you really believe I am mentally incompetent?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to believe, Dad. You've been different lately. More withdrawn, more suspicious. And last night, what about last night? You seemed angry about things that didn't make sense, like you were hearing conversations that weren't really happening." They had twisted everything. My perfectly reasonable response to Zachary's cruelty had been reframed as evidence of mental illness. My hurt at being disrespected in my own home had become paranoid delusions. My finally standing up for myself had been labeled as inappropriate behavior. It was brilliant in a sick way. If I protested, if I got angry, if I tried to defend myself, that would just be more evidence that I was mentally unstable. They had constructed a perfect trap where any reaction I had would prove their point. "I need you both to leave," I said. "Dad, please," Hailey started. "I need you to leave now, and I need time to think about what you've told me." Zachary closed his folder and pulled out a business card. "This is the contact information for Sunset Manor. The director, Linda Patterson, is Mrs. Patterson's niece. She's expecting a call from us. There's actually a nice apartment available right now, and they're holding it for 24 hours. 24 hours? They had already talked to the facility. They had already made arrangements. This was not a conversation about options for the future. This was notification that my future had already been decided. 24 hours for what? I asked. To give you time to adjust to the idea, Hailey said. To let you ask questions and maybe visit the facility. Linda said she could show us around this afternoon if you want. And if I don't want to visit, if I don't want to move into their nice apartment? Another look passed between them. This time it was Hailey who answered. Dad, we've talked to a lawyer. If someone is no longer capable of making safe decisions for themselves, family members can petition the court for guardianship. We really don't want to go that route, but we will if we have to. We love you too much to watch you hurt yourself. Guardianship. They were threatening to have me declared legally incompetent and take away my right to make decisions about my own life. They would control my finances, my living situation, my medical care. They would essentially make me a child again, dependent on their approval for everything, and they were framing it as love. Get out, I said. Dad, get out of my house. Now, they left, but not before Zachary placed the business card on my coffee table like he was leaving a tip for services rendered. I watched through my front window as they got into his BMW and drove away. probably going home to make plans for my incarceration. I sat alone in my living room for a long time, staring at that business card, trying to understand how my life had reached this point. 3 years ago, I'd been a proud, independent man with a successful business and a daughter who loved me. Now I was apparently a confused old person who needed to be managed by people who wished I was dead. But as the shock wore off, something else took its place. Suspicion. The timing was too convenient. Yesterday, Zachary had wished for my death. Today, they were trying to have me declared incompetent and removed from my home. This was not about concern for my safety or my mental health. This was about something else entirely. I picked up the business card and looked at the address. Sunset Manor was across town, a good 20-minute drive from my neighborhood. Far enough away that casual visits would be difficult. Far enough away that I would be effectively isolated from my friends, my neighbors, my support system. I thought about Mrs. Patterson mentioning that I seemed distracted during conversations. Had she really said that? Or had Hailey and Zachary told her to say that? How many other people had they approached with their concerns about my mental state? And then I remembered something Zachary had said. Linda Patterson is Mrs. Patterson's niece. The director of the nursing home was related to my neighbor. How convenient, how perfectly arranged. I walked upstairs to my home office and pulled out the files where I kept important documents. Bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, my will. Everything was in order. Everything was where it should be. But I found myself looking at the numbers with new eyes. My house was worth almost $400,000, paid off completely. My retirement accounts had grown to just over $600,000. I had a life insurance policy worth $200,000, over $1 million in assets, and according to my will, all of it would go to Hailey when I died. All of it would go to Hailey and by extension to Zachary. I sat back in my chair as the full scope of their plan became clear. They did not want me in a nursing home because they were concerned about my well-being. They wanted me in a nursing home because they wanted my house. They wanted access to my finances. They wanted to control my assets while they waited for me to die and leave them everything. Zachary's comment about wishing it was my last birthday was not just cruel, it was strategic. The sooner I died, the sooner they would inherit everything. But if I was going to live longer than they wanted to wait, the next best thing was to have me declared incompetent so they could control my money while I was still alive. I thought about all the money I had given them over the past 3 years, $15,000 in direct payments, but probably much more than that when I added up all the dinners I had paid for, the gifts I had bought them, the vacations I had helped fund. I had been subsidizing their lifestyle while they planned to steal the rest of my assets. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that because I was 73 years old, I must be weak, confused, and easy to manipulate. They had assumed that because I had been generous with them, I was naive about people's motivations. They were wrong on both counts. I had spent 50 years building a successful construction business. I had negotiated contracts, managed employees, dealt with suppliers and customers and competitors. I knew how to read people, how to spot deception, how to protect my interests. And I had not survived this long by being anyone's fool. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, Robert Kim. Robert had been handling my legal affairs for 20 years. He knew me, knew my mental state, knew that I was perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Stuart. Robert's voice was warm and familiar. How are you doing? How was your birthday party? Interesting, I said. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you received any calls from my daughter or son-in-law in the past few weeks? There was a pause. Stuart, is everything all right? Have you received any calls from them? Hailey called last week. She said she was concerned about you, that you seemed to be having some memory issues and difficulty managing your affairs. She asked about the process for establishing guardianship if someone becomes mentally incompetent. My heart sank, but I was not surprised. What did you tell her? I told her that guardianship is a serious legal matter that requires court approval and clear evidence of incapacity. I also told her that from my perspective, you seemed perfectly capable of managing your own affairs, and that if she had concerns, she should encourage you to see a doctor for evaluation. Did she mention anything about nursing homes or assisted living facilities? She asked about what would happen to your assets if you needed long-term care. I explained that there are various options for funding care while protecting assets, but that those conversations should include you as the primary decision maker. Robert had been protecting me without even realizing it. His refusal to help them establish guardianship had forced them to pursue other options, like convincing me to voluntarily move into a facility. Robert, I need to make some changes to my will and my financial arrangements. Can you see me today? Of course. Stuart, are you in some kind of trouble? I'm about to be if I do not take action immediately. Can you meet me at your office in an hour? I'll be here. I hung up the phone and looked around my home office. This room had been my command center for decades, the place where I had planned construction projects, managed my business, made the decisions that built the life I was now fighting to protect. It was time to remind everyone that this old man was not finished yet. It was time to show my daughter and son-in-law that underestimating me was going to be the biggest mistake they ever made. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep their betrayal went. I needed to know who else was involved in their plan and how long they had been working against me. I had 24 hours before they expected an answer about the nursing home. I was going to use every minute of that time to prepare my counterattack, because if Zachary wanted to play games with an old man's life, he was about to learn that this particular old man still knew how to win. Robert Kim's law office was in the same building where he had been practicing for 30 years. I had watched him grow from a young attorney fresh out of law school to one of the most respected estate planning lawyers in the city. More importantly, he had watched me grow from a small contractor trying to figure out business law to a successful businessman who understood the value of good legal advice. "Stuart," he said as his secretary showed me into his office, "you sounded urgent on the phone. What's going on?" I sat down across from his desk and pulled out the business card Zachary had left at my house. "They want to put me in a nursing home. They claim I am having cognitive problems and need supervised care." Robert took the card and studied it for a moment. "Sunset Manor is a reputable facility, but Stuart, you seem perfectly lucid to me. Have you been having any health issues I should know about?" "No health issues, no cognitive problems, no memory loss. What I have is a son-in-law who wished for my death on my birthday, and a daughter who has been convinced that her father is a burden that needs to be managed." I told him everything. The years of financial support, Zachary's increasing disrespect, the conversation about guardianship, the convenient relationship between Mrs. Patterson and the nursing home director. Robert listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, his expression growing more serious as I talked. "How much money have you given them over the past 3 years?" he asked when I finished. "Directly, about 15,000. But when you add in all the other support, dinners, gifts, helping with expenses, probably closer to 25,000. Robert whistled softly. "And they have never repaid any of it?" "Not a dollar, and never a word of genuine gratitude from Zachary. Every request comes through Hailey, and every payment is treated like something I owe them rather than something I am choosing to give. Stuart, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need honest answers. Have you been forgetting things lately? Conversations, appointments, where you put items? No more than anyone else my age. I forgot where I put my reading glasses last week, but I found them on my head. I occasionally forget what day of the week it is when I first wake up, but I remember within seconds. Nothing that would indicate cognitive decline. Have you been having trouble managing your finances, paying bills, balancing accounts, making decisions about investments? All my bills are paid on time, my accounts are balanced to the penny. I reviewed my investment portfolio last month and made some adjustments based on market conditions. Everything is in perfect order." Robert nodded and made another note. "Have you been experiencing mood swings, paranoia, or confusion about familiar people or places?" "I have been angry about being disrespected and taken advantage of. I have been hurt by my daughter's transformation from a loving child to someone who only calls when she needs money, but I have not been confused about anything. I know exactly what is happening and why." "Good. Because based on this conversation, I see no evidence whatsoever of cognitive impairment. What I see is evidence of financial abuse and manipulation by family members who appear to be positioning themselves to take control of your assets." Financial abuse. I had not thought of it in those terms, but Robert was right. That was exactly what was happening. "What are my options?" I asked. "Several, and we need to implement them immediately. First, we are going to revise your will and your financial power of attorney documents. Right now, Hailey is your primary beneficiary and your designated power of attorney if you become incapacitated. Given what you have told me, that needs to change." I do not want to cut Hailey out completely, I said. She is still my daughter, but I want to make sure she cannot access my assets while I am alive, and I want to reduce her inheritance significantly. Understood. We can set up a trust structure that provides for her future needs while protecting your assets from her husband's influence. We can also establish clear conditions for any inheritance she receives. Robert pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out a plan. Second, we need to document your current mental state. I am going to arrange for you to have a comprehensive cognitive evaluation by a neurologist. This will provide legal proof that you are mentally competent and capable of making your own decisions. How long will that take? I have a colleague, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who specializes in these evaluations. I can probably get you an appointment this week. The evaluation will include cognitive testing, memory assessment, and a detailed report that we can use in court if necessary. Court? Stuart, if they are serious about pursuing guardianship, we need to be prepared to fight it. The good news is that the burden of proof is on them. They would need to provide clear medical evidence of incapacity, and from what I have seen, that evidence does not exist. Robert continued writing. Third, we need to protect your assets immediately. I recommend transferring your major assets into an irrevocable trust. This will prevent anyone from claiming you are hiding money, while also ensuring that your wealth is protected from their manipulation. What about my house? We can transfer the house into the trust as well, with provisions that allow you to live there for the rest of your life. This protects the property while ensuring you maintain complete control over your living situation. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time since yesterday's birthday party, I felt like I had some control over what was happening to me. There is one more thing, Robert said. Given what you have told me about their timeline and their coordination with the nursing home, I suspect they may try to force the issue soon. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay if they attempt to remove you from your home? My sister Ruth lives about 2 hours away. She would take me in if I needed somewhere to go. Good. I want you to pack a bag and keep it ready. If they show up with social services or medical personnel claiming you are incompetent, do not resist. Go with Ruth, call me immediately, and we will fight it through proper legal channels. Do you really think they would go that far? Robert set down his pen and looked at me seriously. Stuart, you are talking about over $1 million in assets. People have done much worse things for much less money. Your son-in-law has already wished for your death. I do not think involuntary commitment is beyond his capabilities. The thought sent a chill through me, but it also strengthened my resolve. If they wanted to treat me like an enemy, I would defend myself like one. How quickly can we get these changes implemented? I can have the initial documents ready by tomorrow morning. The cognitive evaluation will take a few days to arrange. The trust setup will take about a week to complete properly. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you document everything. Every conversation, every phone call, every interaction. Keep a detailed record of their behavior and your responses. If this goes to court, we want to show a clear pattern of their manipulation and your competent resistance to it. I left Robert's office with a folder full of documents to review and a list of actions to take. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life instead of just reacting to other people's plans for me. My first stop was the bank. I had been doing business with First National for 40 years, and my banker, Patricia Wells, knew me well enough to recognize that I was operating at full mental capacity. Mr. Montgomery, she said as I walked into her office, how can I help you today? Patricia, I need to make some changes to my accounts. I want to remove my daughter as an authorized user on my checking account, and I want to set up some additional security measures. Of course. Has there been some kind of problem? I explained the situation carefully, watching Patricia's expression grow more concerned as I talked. She had met Hailey many times over the years, had processed the transfers I had been making to help with her expenses. Mr. Montgomery, I have to tell you, we have noticed some patterns in your account activity that raised some flags. The frequency of transfers to your daughter's account, combined with the amounts, fits a profile we see sometimes in elder financial abuse cases. Elder financial abuse. The second time today, someone had used that term to describe my situation. Why did not anyone say anything, I asked. We did consider reaching out, but the transfers were clearly authorized by you, and they were not large enough individually to trigger our automatic reporting requirements. We were monitoring the situation, but we were not sure if intervention was appropriate. It is appropriate now, I said firmly. I want all authorized users removed from my accounts except me. I want to set up a daily spending limit that requires branch approval for any transaction over $500. And I want to be notified immediately if anyone attempts to access my accounts. Patricia processed the changes while I sat in her office, watching my financial security being restored one document at a time. As she worked, she made conversation. You know, we have had several families dealing with similar situations lately. Adult children who assume their parents are not capable of managing their own affairs, even when there is no evidence of problems. It seems to be more common now than it used to be. What do you recommend for people in my situation? Exactly what you're doing. Take back control before someone else takes it away from you, and document everything. If someone is trying to manipulate your family relationships for financial gain, you want to have evidence of their behavior. I left the bank with new account numbers, new security measures, and a detailed statement of all the transactions I had made over the past 3 years. The pattern was even more obvious when I saw it laid out on paper. Regular transfers to Hailey and Zachary's account, always in response to some emergency or crisis, never repaid, always followed by additional requests. My next stop was Dr. Harrison's office. Frank Harrison had been my primary care physician for 15 years. If anyone could provide evidence of my mental competence, it was him. Stuart, Doctor, Harrison said as I explained what I needed. I saw you just 3 months ago for your annual physical. Your cognitive function was completely normal, blood pressure good, cholesterol managed, no signs of neurological problems. You are in excellent health for a man your age. Would you be willing to put that in writing? Absolutely. And I want to refer you to Dr. Mitchell for that comprehensive evaluation your lawyer mentioned. Sarah is the best in the city for these types of assessments. If anyone tries to claim you are mentally incompetent, her evaluation will shut that down immediately. Dr. Harrison wrote a letter on his official letterhead, documenting my recent health history and his professional opinion of my mental state. Another piece of evidence for the file Robert was building. By the time I got home that afternoon, I had armed myself with legal protection, financial security, and medical documentation. But I knew the real test was still coming. Zachary and Hailey were expecting an answer about the nursing home, and they were not going to accept my refusal gracefully. I spent the evening reviewing the documents Robert had given me and preparing for what was almost certainly going to be an unpleasant confrontation. But for the first time in 3 years, I was not approaching that confrontation as a victim hoping for mercy. I was approaching it as a man defending his life and his rights. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Hailey. Dad, we have been thinking about our conversation this morning, and we want you to know that we understand this is difficult for you. Moving to a new place is never easy, especially at your age. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. We talked to Linda Patterson this afternoon, and she agreed to hold that apartment until tomorrow evening. That gives you a full day to think about it and maybe visit the facility. Zachary has already arranged time off work, so he can drive you over there tomorrow morning. That is very thoughtful of him. Dad, I know you are probably feeling overwhelmed right now, but we really believe this is the best thing for you. You will have people around you all the time, activities to keep you engaged, medical care if you need it, and you will not have to worry about maintaining that big house anymore. I see. Plus, and I know this might sound selfish, but Zachary and I have been talking about starting a family soon. If we could move into your house, it would save us a lot of money on rent, and we could use your old room as a nursery. It would be perfect timing for everyone. There it was, the real reason behind their sudden concern for my welfare. They wanted my house for their family, and they wanted me out of the way so they could have it. That does sound like perfect timing, I agreed. Really? You are okay with the idea? I think everyone should have exactly what they deserve, Hailey. Oh, Dad, I am so relieved. I was worried you were going to fight us on this. So you will visit Sunset Manor tomorrow? I will definitely be making some visits tomorrow. Wonderful. Linda is expecting us at 10 o'clock. Zachary will pick you up at 9:30. I will be ready. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen making a final list of preparations. Tomorrow was going to be the day when everyone learned exactly who they had been underestimating. Zachary wanted to play games with an old man's life. He was about to discover that this particular old man still knew how to fight. At 9:25 the next morning, I was standing at my front window watching for Zachary's silver BMW. My overnight bag was packed and sitting by the door, just as Robert had suggested. But it was not packed for a nursing home. It was packed for a trip to my sister Ruth's house, where I would wait while my lawyer handled the legal fallout from what was about to happen. The locksmith had finished his work at 7 o'clock that morning. Every lock on my house had been changed. The spare key I had given Hailey years ago would no longer work. The security system had been updated with new codes. For the first time in 3 years, my home was truly mine again. Zachary pulled into my driveway exactly on time, which somehow made what I was about to do feel even more satisfying. He was so confident in his plan, so sure that I would meekly go along with his scheme, that he had not even considered the possibility that I might fight back. I opened the front door before he could ring the bell. He stood on my porch wearing his usual expression of barely concealed impatience, checking his expensive watch like my existence was inconveniencing his schedule. "Ready to go, Stuart?" he asked, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or good morning. "I am ready," I said, stepping outside and pulling the door closed behind me. "But we are not going to the nursing home." His expression shifted slightly, annoyance replacing impatience. "What do you mean? Hailey said you agreed to visit Sunset Manor this morning." "I agreed to make some visits today. I never said where those visits would be." I walked past him toward his car, enjoying the confusion on his face. After 3 years of his contempt and disrespect, it felt good to be the one controlling the conversation for once. "Stuart, I don't understand what you're talking about. We have an appointment with Linda Patterson at 10 o'clock. You have an appointment with Linda Patterson. I have an appointment with my lawyer at 10 o'clock to finalize some legal documents. You can drop me off at his office." Zachary stopped walking. "What legal documents?" "Documents that protect my interests. Documents that ensure my assets go to people who actually deserve them when I die." The color drained from his face. "Stuart, I think you might be confused about what's happening here. Yesterday we talked about getting you some help, some support as you get older. This isn't about your money or your will." "Really? Then you won't mind that I have removed Hailey as my primary beneficiary and my financial power of attorney." He stared at me like I had just announced I was planning to fly to the moon. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. I am 73 years old, not dead. I am mentally competent, financially independent, and perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my life and my assets. But Hailey said you were having problems, memory issues, confusion, difficulty managing your affairs. The only confusion I had was thinking that my daughter and her husband actually cared about my well-being rather than my bank account. That confusion has been cleared up." Zachary's mask was slipping. The polite concern was being replaced by something much uglier, much more honest. "Stuart, you are making a mistake. You need help whether you realize it or not, and Hailey is your family. She should be the one helping you make these decisions. Hailey is an adult woman who has chosen to prioritize her husband's opinions over her father's dignity. That was her choice. These are the consequences of that choice." We had reached his car, but he made no move to unlock it. Instead, he turned to face me fully, and for the first time in 3 years I had his complete attention. "What exactly do you think you know?" he asked. "I know you wished for my death on my birthday. I know you and Hailey have been planning to have me declared incompetent so you can control my assets. I know you have already made arrangements with a nursing home to warehouse me while you take over my house and spend my money. I know Mrs. Patterson's niece is conveniently the director of that facility, and I know you think I am too old and too stupid to stop you." His eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. That's not what this is about. We are genuinely worried about you. You are starting to sound paranoid, Stuart. Paranoid thinking is one of the early signs of dementia. Is it also an early sign of dementia when someone accurately identifies that their family members are plotting against them? No one is plotting against you. We love you. You love my money. There's a difference. Zachary looked around my neighborhood, probably checking to see if any of my neighbors were watching our conversation. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more controlled. "Stuart, I think you need to be very careful about the decisions you're making right now. Hailey is your only child. If you alienate her, if you cut her out of your will, you're going to die alone. Is that really what you want? I would rather die alone with my dignity intact than live surrounded by people who see me as a burden and wish I was dead. I never said I wished you were dead. Hope it's his last." Your exact words yesterday during the cake cutting. For just a moment, his careful composure cracked completely. I saw shock, then fear, then calculation, as he realized I had heard him. Then the mask went back up, but it was too late. He knew that I knew, and I knew that he knew I knew. "You misunderstood what you heard," he said finally. "Did I? Then explain to me what you meant by hoping it was my last birthday." He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. The pretense of caring was gone, replaced by cold honesty. "Fine. You want to know what I really think? I think you are a selfish old man who has outlived his usefulness. I think Hailey would be better off without you manipulating her emotions and guilting her into taking care of you. And yes, I think the world would be a better place if you stopped taking up space and resources that younger people could use more productively." There it was. 3 years of fake politeness stripped away to reveal the truth underneath. He did not just dislike me, he genuinely believed I had no right to exist. "Thank you for your honesty," I said calmly. "It makes what I am about to do much easier." "What you are about to do?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. It was set to record, and the recording had been running for the past 5 minutes. "I'm about to share this conversation with my lawyer, my doctor, and anyone else who might be interested in your actual feelings about my continued existence. I'm about to use your own words to prove that your concern for my welfare is a complete fabrication designed to steal my assets." He lunged for my phone, but I had expected that reaction. I stepped back and slipped the phone into my pocket. "That recording was made without my consent," he said. "It's not admissible in court." "Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation." I consented. "The recording is perfectly legal and completely admissible." His face was red now, with anger or embarrassment or both. "You set me up. I gave you the opportunity to tell the truth about your motivations. You chose to take that opportunity. Stuart, you don't understand what you are doing. You think you are protecting yourself, but you are just making everything worse. Hailey loves you. She wants to help you. If you push her away, if you turn her against me, you are going to destroy your relationship with your own daughter. My relationship with my daughter was destroyed the moment she chose to enable your plan to rob me, the moment she prioritized your opinions over my rights, the moment she decided that managing me was more important than loving me." I started walking back toward my house. "You can leave now, Zachary. You are no longer welcome on my property. We had an appointment. You had an appointment. I had a trap. The appointment served its purpose." He followed me partway up my driveway, his voice getting louder. "Stuart, this isn't over. You can't just cut us off. We have rights. Hailey has rights as your daughter. Hailey has the rights I choose to give her, and based on her recent behavior, I am choosing to give her very few. You can't do this." I reached my front door and turned back to face him one last time. "Watch me." I put my key in the new lock and opened my door. Behind me, I could hear Zachary standing in my driveway, probably trying to figure out what had just happened and how his perfect plan had fallen apart so quickly. Inside my house, I called Ruth to let her know I would be coming to stay with her for a few days. Then I called Robert to let him know phase 1 of our plan had been successful. Then I sat down in my kitchen and listened to Zachary's car finally start up and drive away. My phone rang 20 minutes later. It was Hailey and she was crying. "Dad, what did you do? Zachary just called me and he's saying terrible things. He says you recorded him without permission, that you ambushed him, that you are cutting me out of your will." "All of those things are true," I said. "But why? I don't understand what happened. Yesterday you seemed ready to consider moving to Sunset Manor, and now Zachary is saying you've lost your mind completely." "Hailey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your husband does not love you, he does not respect you, and he definitely does not love or respect me. He is using you to get access to my money, and he is using both of us to build the life he thinks he deserves." "That's not true, Dad. Zachary loves me. We're planning to start a family. In my house with my money, after I am conveniently out of the way in a nursing home or dead." "Dad, you're scaring me. You're starting to sound like those paranoid elderly people who think everyone is trying to steal from them. I am starting to sound like a man who finally understands what is actually happening to him. Hailey, I have evidence. I have recordings, documents, legal advice from professionals who specialize in elder abuse. This is not paranoia. This is reality. I want to come over. I want to talk to you face to face. You can try, but the locks have been changed. You no longer have access to my house." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "You changed the locks," she finally said. "I changed the locks. I changed my will. I changed my financial power of attorney. I changed everything that gave you and your husband access to my life and my assets." "Dad, please. I know things have been difficult lately, and maybe Zachary hasn't always been as respectful as he should be, but we can work this out. We're family. Family members don't try to have each other declared mentally incompetent so they can steal their money. Family members don't wish for each other's death on their birthdays. Family members don't plot to warehouse their relatives in nursing homes against their will. We never plotted anything. We were worried about you. Play back your conversation with Robert Kim about guardianship procedures. Play back your husband's comments about my house being perfect for your nursery. Play back every phone call where you asked for money but never asked how I was feeling or what I needed. Then tell me again that this was about worry rather than greed. Another long silence. I'm coming over anyway, she said finally. We need to talk. The door will be locked. The security system will be armed. And if you try to force entry, I will call the police. You would call the police on your own daughter. I would call the police on anyone who tried to break into my home after being told they were not welcome. Dad, I love you. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do love you. I want what's best for you. If you love me, Hailey, prove it. Leave me alone. Let me live my life in peace. Stop trying to manage me and start trying to understand me. I can't do that. You're my father. I can't just walk away. Then you have chosen your husband's plan over your father's wishes, and you will have to live with the consequences of that choice. I hung up the phone and turned it off. In an hour, I would be driving to Ruth's house, where I would spend the next few days, while Robert handled the legal aspects of my declaration of independence. But first, I wanted to sit in my kitchen one more time, in the house I had built with my own hands, and appreciate the silence. No phone calls asking for money. No visits from people who saw me as a problem to be solved. No conversations with family members who wished I was dead. Just the peaceful quiet of a man who had finally stopped letting other people control his life. Tomorrow, Hailey and Zachary would discover that the locks had been changed. They would realize that their meal ticket had been permanently cancelled. They would understand that the old man they had been taking advantage of was stronger than they had imagined. And I would begin the next chapter of my life, surrounded by people who actually wanted me alive. 6 months later, I was sitting on Ruth's back porch, watching my 4-year-old great-nephew Tommy chase fireflies in the fading summer light. The boy had the same stubborn chin that Hailey had inherited from me, and the same curiosity about how everything worked. Earlier that afternoon, he had spent 2 hours helping me fix a loose board on Ruth's deck, asking endless questions and handing me the wrong tools with complete confidence. It reminded me of who Hailey used to be before Zachary convinced her that her father was an embarrassment instead of a person. "Uncle Stuart," Tommy called from the yard, "how come fireflies light up?" "They have a special chemical inside them that glows when they want to talk to each other," I called back. "Like my mom's phone." Ruth laughed from her chair beside me. "Everything is like someone's phone to that kid." I had been staying with Ruth for 3 weeks now, longer than originally planned, but neither of us was in a hurry for me to leave. After 40 years of living alone, I had forgotten how pleasant it could be to share meals with someone, to have conversations that were not about money or problems, to feel like my presence was welcomed rather than tolerated. Ruth was 70 years old, a retired teacher with a quick wit and a fierce protective instinct toward family members who deserved protection. She had been furious when I told her about Hailey and Zachary's plan to warehouse me in a nursing home. "That boy always rubbed me the wrong way," she had said the first night I arrived at her house. "Too smooth, too calculating, like he was always working an angle instead of just being genuine." Ruth's assessment had proven accurate in every respect. The legal proceedings had been swift and decisive. Robert Kim had presented my case with precision that left no room for doubt about my mental competence or my right to control my own affairs. The recording of Zachary's confession had been particularly effective in court. Judge Martinez had been blunt in his dismissal of their guardianship petition. This appears to be a transparent attempt by family members to gain control of Mr. Montgomery's assets through false claims of incapacity. Not only is there no evidence supporting these claims, but there is substantial evidence that the petitioners have ulterior financial motives. The cognitive evaluation Dr. Mitchell had conducted showed my mental function to be well within normal ranges for my age group. In fact, my scores in several areas were above average, probably because a lifetime of running a business had kept my mind sharp. More importantly, the financial investigation Robert had requested revealed the full scope of what Hailey and Zachary had been planning. They had already met with real estate agents about selling my house. They had researched long-term care insurance policies that would have given them access to my assets. They had even priced out renovations for converting my home office into a nursery, all before I had agreed to move anywhere. The new will I had created was fair but firm. Hailey would inherit a modest sum when I died, enough to provide security, but not enough to fund the lifestyle she and Zachary had been planning. The bulk of my estate would go to charity, specifically to organizations that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. Ruth would inherit my house, with the provision that she could live there as long as she wanted or sell it and keep the proceeds. Ruth had earned that inheritance through 40 years of being a genuine, loving sister who had never asked me for anything except occasional help moving furniture. The financial changes had been implemented immediately. All the accounts Hailey had access to were closed. All the monthly transfers to their household were stopped. All the emergency bailouts and crisis interventions were permanently ended. The results had been predictable but still satisfying to watch from a distance. Within a month, Zachary and Hailey were facing serious financial pressure. Without my subsidies, they could not afford their apartment, their car payments, or their credit card bills. They had been living beyond their means for so long that they had no savings, no emergency fund, no plan for supporting themselves independently. Zachary's job, which had seemed so impressive when he was bragging about it at family dinners, apparently did not pay as well as he had implied. Or perhaps his expensive tastes had grown beyond his actual income. Either way, they were forced to move out of their apartment and into a smaller place across town. The BMW was repossessed. I heard about that from Mrs. Patterson, who had remained loyal to me despite her niece's involvement in the nursing home scheme. Mrs. Patterson had been horrified when she learned how her family connection had been used to manipulate me. "I never told Linda that you were having problems," she had assured me during one of our phone conversations. "When Hailey asked me about your behavior at the birthday party, I just said you seemed a little distracted. I had no idea they were planning to use that against you." Mrs. Patterson had become one of my strongest allies in the neighborhood. She kept an eye on my house while I was away and provided updates on any attempts by Hailey or Zachary to return to the property. There had been several such attempts. 2 weeks after I changed the locks, Hailey had shown up at my house with a locksmith, claiming she needed to get some personal items she had left behind. Mrs. Patterson had called the police, who informed Hailey that she no longer had any legal right to enter the property. A week later, Zachary had tried a different approach. He had contacted my neighbors, claiming I was missing and that he was worried about my safety. He suggested they should call for a welfare check, which would have given him an excuse to involve social services in my situation. But my neighbors knew me better than Zachary had anticipated. Jim Morrison had told him exactly what he thought of that idea, using language that was probably inappropriate for a family-friendly conversation. The welfare check never materialized. The most pathetic attempt had been Hailey's letter, which arrived at Ruth's house about a month after I left. It was 5 pages long, full of apologies and explanations and promises to do better. She claimed that Zachary had pressured her into the nursing home plan, that she had never really believed I was mentally incompetent, that she missed our relationship and wanted to repair it. The letter might have been more convincing if it had not included a paragraph about their financial difficulties and a suggestion that we could work together to find a solution that helped everyone. Even in her apology, she was still asking for money. I had not responded to the letter. Robert had advised me that any communication with them could be seen as an invitation to renew their manipulation efforts. Clean breaks were cleaner for a reason, but that did not mean the situation had been easy to navigate emotionally. Losing Hailey hurt in ways I had not anticipated. Not just the obvious loss of my only child, but the loss of the grandchildren I would probably never meet, the family traditions that would end with me, the sense of continuity that comes from having people who will remember you after you are gone. Some nights, lying in Ruth's guest bedroom, I wondered if I had been too harsh, if there had been a way to salvage the relationship while still protecting myself, if Hailey might have chosen differently if I had given her another chance. But then I would remember Zachary's voice wishing for my death. I would remember Hailey's willingness to have me declared incompetent to advance their financial plans. I would remember the 3 years of taking my money while giving me nothing but disrespect in return. And I would realize that the relationship I was mourning had not actually existed for a long time. The loving daughter I missed had been replaced by someone who saw me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved. I had not lost Hailey recently. I had lost her gradually over the course of 3 years, as Zachary's influence grew stronger and my value to them became purely financial. What I had done was simply acknowledge a loss that had already occurred. The freedom that came with that acknowledgement was profound. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning without wondering what crisis would require my money or attention. I made plans based on what I wanted to do, rather than what someone else needed me to do. I spent my money on things that brought me joy, instead of things that brought me temporary acceptance from people who did not really accept me anyway. I had reconnected with old friends from the construction business. I had joined a woodworking group that met twice a week at the community center. I had started volunteering at a literacy program, teaching adults how to read. These activities filled my time with purpose and surrounded me with people who valued my knowledge and experience. Most importantly, I had rediscovered the difference between being alone and being lonely. I had been surrounded by family for 3 years, but I had been deeply lonely because those family members did not genuinely care about my well-being. Now I was technically alone, but I felt connected to a community of people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. "Uncle Stuart," Tommy called from the yard, "will you help me catch fireflies?" "Sure thing, buddy," I said, getting up from my chair. "But we have to be gentle with them. We will catch them and look at them, then let them go so they can talk to their families." Ruth smiled as I walked past her toward the yard. "You're good with him. You should have had more kids." "I had the one I was supposed to have. It just did not work out the way I planned." "Her loss," Ruth said firmly. "That girl threw away the best father she could have asked for." I spent the next hour in Ruth's backyard, teaching Tommy how to cup his hands around fireflies without hurting them, explaining how to approach them slowly so they would not fly away, showing him the magic of holding a living light in his palm for just a moment before setting it free. He was fascinated by everything, asking questions that made me think about familiar things in new ways. His excitement was infectious, his wonder genuine. He reminded me why I had loved being a father when Hailey was his age, before relationships became complicated by money and expectations and other people's agendas. As we walked back toward the house with our empty hands and our full hearts, Tommy looked up at me with serious 4-year-old eyes. "Uncle Stuart, are you sad that you don't have fireflies to keep?" "No, buddy. I'm happy that I got to see them glow." And that was the truth. I was happy that I had gotten to see the good parts of being Hailey's father, even though I could not keep those moments forever. I was happy that I had learned to recognize real love from manipulation before it was too late to protect myself. I was happy that I had found the strength to choose my own dignity over other people's approval. 6 months ago, I had been a lonely old man, desperately trying to buy affection from people who wished I was dead. Today, I was a free man surrounded by people who were genuinely glad I was alive. The change had cost me my daughter, my savings account contributions to her lifestyle, and the illusion that family relationships automatically come with love and respect. In return, it had given me back my self-respect, my financial security, and the opportunity to spend my remaining years on relationships that were based on mutual care rather than financial dependence. That was a trade I would make again without hesitation. As I tucked Tommy into bed that night, reading him a story about brave knights and wise dragons, I thought about the letter I had been considering writing to Hailey. Not a letter asking for reconciliation or offering financial support, but a letter explaining what she had lost when she chose Zachary's greed over her father's love. Then I decided not to write it. Hailey would figure out what she had lost eventually, probably when she was older, and needed the kind of support that only a loving parent can provide. By then, I might be gone, and she would have to live with the knowledge that she had traded away the only person who would have loved her unconditionally. That would be education enough. For now, I had fireflies to watch, stories to read, and a life to live on my own terms. I had finally learned the most important lesson of my 73 years. Respect cannot be bought, but it can definitely be demanded, and demanding it had set me free.